I worked in the auto industry for nearly 30 years and then thought I was retiring, moved to California, and now I'm running for mayor. I am proud to say that I was a founder of Labor Notes. I've attended every Labor Notes conference. I wrote or co-wrote 4 Labor Notes books, including books on union management participation and the book that's available out there, Democracy is Power. So, let me just tell you a little bit about Richmond, California. It's in the Bay Area. It's a working class city, doesn't have a community college. It's about 40% Latino, 25% black, 15% Asian, and the unemployment rate is about twice the rate in the surrounding county. Now, my run for mayor is not, as many of you who've met me thought, it's not a protest campaign. It's not an educational campaign. In fact, the progressive movement in the city already leads the city. Chevron, what this campaign is about Chevron Corporation trying to retake control of the city council it lost over the past 8 years. The story of how we did it over this period of time is long and complicated and basically a story of patient organizing and working with social movements. Those of you who want to follow up on that story can go to the Richmond Progressive Alliance website, richmondprogressivealliance.net, and click on the About tab, and that will lead you to the full story of what happened in Richmond. The current mayor is a registered Green. The election itself, the elections for city council are nonpartisan. So the RPA essentially consists of a coalition of independents, Greens, liberal Democrats, and various and assorted other folks, all of whom understand that this is an independent political project. In Richmond, the RPA is treated as another political party as opposed to the Democrats, even though many of the members still support Democrats on a national basis. The current mayor, is termed out. She is probably the most popular politician in Richmond, but she can't run again for mayor, so she is running on a slate with us for council. I'm running for mayor, and there are 2 other people running for council so that we may keep a majority on the council. All right, are we going to win? Well, we're expecting to win, except for the fact that Chevron is now spending, by my estimates, $25 million to defeat us. About $20 million in, quote, good works money to buy off various and sundry nonprofits and service providers, and only about $5 million directly for their candidates. So there are no guarantees, but we still expect to win. Now, I'd like to say that we've done a lot of local work, but I think we need to be really clear about what local work really means. There's now a flurry of books out there about how real change is coming from local politics. The most famous book is If Mayors Ran the World. Nation magazine is currently running a series on the subject. I'd like to say that fundamental change, the idea that fundamental change is taking place as a result of this local work, is 90% hogwash. I say hogwash only because that's one of my biggest concessions in running for mayor. That is that I can't use shop talk. The other concessions are I have to wear a tie more than I want to, and I have to give up more time than I thought possible. But frankly, in many areas, what we are doing in the city is very much like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. For the most part, cities do not have the power to do anything about the fundamental problems facing them or facing their populations. Take the question of taxes, for example. Taxes are necessary to pay for critical services, quality of life, like parks, recreation, libraries, and making up for the shedding national safety net. Now, taxes can't be raised in Richmond except under one condition. The right wing in the state has taken care of that. The only taxes that can be raised in Richmond are totally regressive taxes, and even most of those require a 2/3 vote. Essentially, raising taxes is pretty much out in a city like Richmond. The truth is that the big statewide unions are far more key to getting fair taxation in California than the city of Richmond. It's the big unions in California which have the power to actually run the kinds of campaigns that are necessary. And so winning elections in these unions is probably far more important in terms of changing things than winning elections in a city. Similarly, the city can't do a jobs and a stimulus program. That's all federal. Yet without these, we can't do and attack the fundamental problems in the city. You can't do something about crime and blight, really, unless you can provide people with jobs, unless you can stop foreclosures and do all of those things. So there's not much that you can do in Richmond, and that's why I say the idea that fundamental change is actually taking place through this local organizing is wrong. It's not what it's all about. Let's take the thing that Richmond is most known for nationally. Richmond pursued the idea of using eminent domain as a way to keep people in their homes rather than forcing people out of their homes. Everybody who hears this idea thinks it's a wonderful idea. It makes sense. And it isn't even a big challenge to capitalism, actually. It only really just fixes the market. But it's a great idea. But the banks and all kinds of others are opposed to it, and they're fighting it. The federal government, 2 agencies of the federal government have threatened Richmond if we adopt this thing. The banks are trying to strangle Richmond's ability to sell bonds on the bond market if we continue to pursue this thing. So there are limits to what you can do in a city. As a result of this power that the banks and others have, we're sort of right now treading water on this program. We're waiting for other cities to join in. Every city that has expressed interest in it have been sort of forced back by the lobbying powers of the banks. The only city that stood firm on it has been Richmond. So as soon as we get another California city into this thing, it will go forward. But until then, we're sort of stuck waiting and propagandizing for it. All right, so if I say that 90% of the issues that we deal with are, in fact, rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic, I want to insist that the other 10% is very important. It's very important for 2 reasons. One, it does help deal with some of the problems. I'll mention a couple of those things. But mainly, it's important because it really is a struggle for power. It's about challenging the illusion that big money cannot be defeated. It's about the power of independence, a power of an independent movement that bases itself on social justice movements, unions, and community organizations, rather than the corporate-dominated political parties. This, in turn, tends to force these organizations to define themselves and choose sides. So, for example, right now in the current struggle, the building trades have clearly lined up with Chevron. But many of the other unions, including public employees unions, ATU, 1555, CNA, and UHW, SEIU, and other unions, have lined up with us. They understand that the need is to fight for the whole working class. It's no accident that in the city of Richmond, in the Bay Area during the BART strike, it was only City of Richmond elected officials that came out publicly and actively in support of the BART strike. Everybody else ran for cover. We're solving a series of smaller problems. We won municipal IDs, which are very important for undocumented workers. We raised the minimum wage to $12.30. That's on the books and will pass at the next council meeting. That puts it as one of the highest in the country. It's not high enough. It's not high enough. In our campaign for it, we constantly said that it wasn't high enough. We said it wasn't anywhere near a living wage, but that the city had to lead the way in the Bay Area to start the virtuous circle up rather than the vicious cycle down. And so that's what we did. We use electoral action to strengthen these movements that we work with. We've worked with shifting resources from jails to job training. And we've slowed down foreclosures with various programs, including the eminent domain issue. So when we use electoral action, we mainly use it to strengthen these movements and to show that we actually have some power and can challenge corporations. And that's really what the struggle is all about. It's not enough to do it in a local area. We have to move it to a bigger area. But the lesson we have to take out of this thing is it is possible to fight and win. Things to quickly deal with. First of all, city manager form of government, which some of us have and some of us don't have. The city manager form of government is essentially designed to shield the city operations and the operations of the real social powers in the city from the population and from the democratic process. And that's one of the things that we're fighting in Richmond. That's a long discussion. Some of it's already gone, and it indicates, I think, something that's very important that Marcia brought up, which is we're primarily, the Richmond Progressive Alliance is not primarily an electoral organization. It's primarily a community organization which struggles in between elections, works with the council members that we've elected, but most of the things that we've accomplished in partnership between social movements and elected officials who speak for them, give them some legitimacy, but without having large numbers of people who come out on things, who go out to other forums and other venues in order to fight for them, we wouldn't win anything. I agree with Marshall also that the problem in most cities is the problem of developers. The problem with developers is it's often split. In Richmond we have the advantage or the disadvantage that the main issue is really Chevron Corporation, one single corporation which defines the politics of the city. So the developer question, while it comes up, is not as big there. But let's understand the developer question and all these other questions tend to be divisive within a city. Different people's oxes get gored. So one of the jobs of these movements, if you're going to actually survive and build independent politics, is not get caught up in those battles, but find the class questions that exist in the city. So that's why we put our emphasis on things like minimum wage, like ending driver's license checkpoints, which attack undocumented workers. Going for the questions which can unite the working people in the city. We put our emphasis on supporting social movements and unions as opposed to saying we'll come up with city programs to solve these things, because the city programs won't do it, but these social movements or the unions can do it. So these things are all really important. And finally, once you start winning some things, the civil liberties questions actually change. It's a whole other discussion. But actually, we have, in Richmond, California, we have multiple demonstrations against Chevron. We never ask for a police permit. We simply march. The police only go to the head of the march and ask, what route are you taking? And they go ahead and they stop the cross traffic and they send some cars to the back. Okay, that's what they do for us. Then when we get to Chevron, they stand on Chevron's property and prevent us from going any further. That's a different arrangement than in other cities. That's partly because there's a real movement in the city that has political power.